Hello everyone, and today we're going to be talking about anger. So I'm going to be sharing some insight from my own experiences of working with anger and processing anger and really becoming aware of what anger is. So we often have a very negative belief system around the emotion anger. And this is because in society, anger is seen as being bad or wrong. So often we class the emotion of anger as being negative. So let's look at what actually anger is. Anger is an emotion, and an emotion is an energy vibration, right? We feel anger in the body. We feel the sensations of anger. And our emotions carry many insights and messages, or we could call these personal truths, right? Emotions arise to let us know something. So anger is often feared and shamed and seen as negative because anger is a very intense and powerful emotion. Anger has the ability to destroy and to burn, right? And not only do we burn or destroy things around us, but also it has the potential to destroy and ruin relationships. And what often happens is when we feel anger and we haven't had the correct understanding of what actually anger is, and we haven't been taught, or we haven't built the capacity in our system to hold and process anger, we become controlled by it, right? There's a difference between feeling anger and holding it and allowing it to flow through us and becoming anger. So when we become anger, we are controlled by it. Our speech, our actions, our choices, and our decisions are dictated from that place of anger. And this is why after we have felt anger and expressed it, we can often later feel a lot of regret and shame for what we've either said or done, or the decisions or choices we made when we felt angry. So anger is very, very misunderstood. And because there is so much shame and guilt and negativity towards and around anger, we never really truly master being able to tune into and listen to the messages that anger is bringing us. And so today I'm going to share some insights from my own personal experience working with anger and my past experiences of having a very negative relationship with anger. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why we believe anger is negative. So we have to go back into our childhoods for this, because all of our core beliefs and our core conditioning was created in our childhood. And when we're children, right, we are very open and expressive and authentic with our experiences. Our emotions are expressed in very authentic, raw ways. And what happens is when we start to express anger, we either get met with our parents or caregivers or society with their beliefs through their actions and the way we get treated when we express that anger. And then that becomes our core belief through our experience of what we think anger means. So, for example, we may start to express anger when we are toddlers, and we either get punished physically, emotionally, or mentally. So this can look like physical punishment, being smacked. We can either be ignored. So this looks like a parent completely dismissing the fact that we are feeling and expressing anger. Or we can get sent to our room or sent on the naughty step. We can be shamed. So sometimes our parents or caregivers will say things like, stop showing off, stop throwing a tantrum, or good little boys and good little girls don't get angry. We can be compared. So sometimes we may hear, why can't you be more like your brother or your sister? Or I bet so-and-so doesn't act like this. So why does this happen? It's because our parents or our caregivers also was conditioned to have those beliefs around anger. And when they expressed anger, these patterns and these limiting beliefs got passed down through generation to generation. And so our behaviors become automatic, deeply ingrained in our being. So what's the message that we receive about anger when we feel anger in our childhood? Well, when we're children, we don't have the ability to process or learn to regulate or learn to inquire into our emotions. We often feel lots of intense emotions and we don't know what to do with them, right? We're learning. And so we really look to our parents and our caregivers for support and guidance and knowledge and understanding. And this isn't just through being told, but also through we watch our parents' actions. And so when we're young, we don't have the ability or the capacity to process and hold big emotions like anger. And so when we're ignored or we're sent to our room or we're punished physically, mentally, or emotionally, or we're shamed or we're compared, this sends us the message that in that moment, there is a withdrawal of love. There is a withdrawal of connection from those that we love very much. There is non-approval and non-acceptance for the way we are feeling and expressing ourselves. And when we're young, our whole survival depends upon the love, acceptance, and care of our parents and our caregivers. So what happens is we learn very quickly that certain emotions gets us love and connection and all our needs met, right? And we survive. And certain emotions, for example, anger, that puts us into this state of, I am unsafe, I am not loved, I am in danger. And it's a very primal, raw survival way of keeping us safe. So we learn very quickly to either suppress, deny, and reject and not express certain emotions, and that our belief system around that emotion becomes, it's bad, it's wrong, I'm not getting loved, I'm not getting taken care of. And so what happens is when our identity, our sense of self, our personhood or our personality is being created in childhood, right? That person we believe to be. And when we hear things like, so for example, say anger arises and we start to express it, we may hear the feedback from other people that stop being naughty, or you're being very bad, and or stop being angry, right? So our sense of identity, or our ego, or in the East, we call it the ahamkar, which is called the I maker, the sense of self, identifies with the experience of anger. So I am angry, rather than I am feeling angry, or I am experiencing anger. And because we're getting a negative, unloving, unapproved, unaccepted reaction to that emotion when we express it, as we start to grow up, every time we experience or feel anger, that voice inside our head will start to repeat that we heard others say. So, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this. This is bad. This is wrong. I'm bad. I'm wrong. I'm anger. So this is how our conditioning starts to take a toll and starts to affect and distort the perception of ourself. And we build a very distorted belief around certain emotions and who we really are. And if our parents and our caregivers wasn't taught how to process anger and how to express it in healthy ways that doesn't have negative consequences, then they're not able to support us and share that wisdom and guidance with us. So it's nobody's fault. It's just the way our conditioning and our misunderstandings and our habitual patterns and our limiting beliefs get carried through the family chain, the family lineage, and then that ripples out into society. So just for a moment, I invite you to just become aware of your beliefs around anger, and to go back in time and recall the narrative, or that self-talk, that self-judgment, that self-criticism that you have about yourself when you feel anger arising. Is it positive? Is it what we call negative? What do you think and believe about yourself when you feel anger? So for most of us, it would be negative. We would have a negative narrative. We would believe negative things about ourselves and others when we see someone expressing anger, or when we feel anger arising. So anger is actually a neutral emotion. There is no positive or negative or good or bad or right or wrong emotion. Emotions just are. And when we deeply tune into and recognize the sensations and the moment that anger is arising, rather than becoming controlled by our anger, we can build the capacity to recognize and to hold and to allow and to listen into and to discern, right, the messages that anger is carrying with it. And we can consciously choose from a place of wisdom and understanding how we want to respond to anger, how we want to respond to a situation or a person when anger is arising. So when I finally had the ability and the tools and the courage, and if I'm quite honest, once I'd hit a point in my life where I had realized that fighting my anger and trying to suppress it and trying to reject it and trying to get rid of it for so many years wasn't working for me, right? Because when we suppress anger, when we try to ignore it and reject it, it's almost like we hold on to it. It gets suppressed. It almost gets kind of stuck in our system. And anything we resist persists. Anything we push back on gains more power from the act of resistance. So what I found in my life was that anger started to, when I didn't listen to the messages of anger, right, because I was too consumed with trying to get rid of it and feeling like a bad person when I felt anger, I wasn't able to listen to the messages. So I was so busy trying to suppress and get rid of it and having this narrative play out in my mind that my anger, I noticed when I looked back on my life, started to leak out in very passive aggressive ways, right? So I would maybe be feeling anger and I wouldn't quite say it or express it because I had a lot of shame and guilt around it. But what I would do was there would be these like passive aggressive comments or like slamming a door or um, it's quite funny to look back on. You know, I wasn't saying that I felt angry about something and trying to resolve the issue with the person, but wow, you could really feel the energy of anger like penetrating from me. And it's really not nice to be around somebody that doesn't have a healthy relationship with their anger and doesn't have the ability to express it in healthy, productive ways. If you've ever been in a room where you absolutely know, because you can feel the tension in the room, that someone's angry, but they're not really saying, it's horrible. It feels icky and uncomfortable, and it just doesn't feel good at all. So a lot of the time we have a lot of unhealthy relationships with anger when we have poor boundaries, right? And this is where resentment can come up, because when we don't know what our boundaries are and we're not able to express them in healthy, clear, direct ways, we find ourselves constantly overstepping our own boundaries, and then we end up blaming the other person and becoming very resentful. And with resentment comes that ickiness of passive aggressiveness. The other way that my anger would show up is in huge explosions. I would be triggered and I would just explode like a cannonball. And of course, something had to trigger me, but in those moments, I would often find myself saying things to the person that had triggered my anger that had happened weeks ago or months ago or years ago, things that I hadn't said in the moment, and they'd become so suppressed and so undigested and so unprocessed that suddenly this little trigger, and it was like this huge explosion of all the times they've said things and I haven't addressed it, or they've done things. And the problem with that is that in that moment, we become so consumed by that energy. It's so, so powerful, right? Anger is so powerful. It actually has the ability for massive transformations in our lives when used correctly, when harnessed and understood and held and mastered. The power of anger can really create significant changes in our lives in the world. But when we're so consumed by it, it controls us and we almost black out, right? Um, we almost become so possessed by this energy that we completely lose our center of being. It's like we're almost not seeing that person in front of us. We're just seeing anger. So when I sat with my anger, when I had fully had enough of being controlled by my anger, because I could see so many unhealthy, unproductive, really destructive patterns in my life that occurred around me feeling angry, And I finally sat with my anger. It was like this moment of like, you know what? I am done with trying to get rid of it, which didn't work, right? I spent many years on the spiritual path, and the first thing I learned was anger's bad and jealousy's bad and it's wrong and you should just not feel it, and everything's love and light. And I tried for many years to get rid of my anger, and it literally only made it worse. And I felt very fake, because I was trying to live up to this impossible expectation of being kind and generous and a spiritual person, when inside I could often feel a lot of anger arising. So I felt very torn and split within me. And there were moments that I absolutely hated myself when I felt anger arising, because of all that self-identity that I was bad and I was wrong and I shouldn't be feeling. So when I finally allowed myself to feel the anger, not become controlled by it, but to listen to the messages of it, it took me on a path through many, many other emotions. So first I felt a lot of heat in my body and a lot of contraction, and it felt all consuming in moments, and I just stayed with it, and I watched the sensations arising from the pit of my stomach up to my chest like a fire rising, and then into my throat where there was a lot of constriction. And at moments I felt afraid, and I realized just how much fear I had around my anger. But staying with the emotion, the sensations and the emotion itself started to transform and move. And it took me on a path of pain and feeling powerless and deep, deep sadness and frustration and feeling very unloved and misunderstood. And then finally, through the process, I reached the pit of what anger had been shielding me from, which was feeling all these painful emotions. Anger had acted like a shield or a defense mechanism that tried to shield me from feeling what I was truly feeling, right? Anger was shielding me from the truth. And what anger does is it acts as a defense, right? Anger comes in to defend us, right? When we feel unsafe or attacked. But it also has an attack quality to it. So I would attack others and I would attack myself, because I wasn't able to tune into this deeper feeling, this deeper emotion that was grief. A deep, deep pit of the stomach grief. And this grief, I realized I had been fearing all of my life. And it took me through many memories of childhood and being told off or being smacked, being sent to my room, being met with anger, being met with disapproval and unacceptance. And I realized in all of those moments of my past experiences, there was this longing to just be loved and be held unconditionally, even in those moments where anger had arose and taken me over. And what I realized that I had to do was give myself that approval, that unconditional love, that awareness, that undivided attention and acceptance. And I just held myself. And to be honest, I sobbed. I sobbed and I sobbed and I sobbed and I sobbed. And after sobbing for quite some time, this huge expansion happened, and I found myself in love, completely consumed and cradled in love. And I realized that in those moments of anger, all I wanted was love. All I wanted was connection. That those moments when I felt anger, I either felt unsafe or unheard or misunderstood or unloved or unaccepted. And that deep desire for all of those things was so painful to not receive them in those moments that anger came in to protect. And in doing so, it attacked. And quite some time after that process that I went through, which was now about 3 years ago, I was walking my dog and I was walking down a country road and there was a mother and a buggy and a toddler. And the toddler ran out into the road. And the mother screamed and ran into the road and grabbed the toddler and took the toddler back onto the pavement and started to shout and scream and yell and telling off this toddler. And the toddler was crying and crying and crying. And in that moment, I could see the truth. In that moment, my own understanding of my own experience and that whole process that I went through, I saw in that mother fear. So much fear that her toddler was going to get hit by a car. And I saw pain and sadness and powerlessness that she couldn't stop the child from running in the road. And at the depth in that moment that she was so rageful towards that toddler, I could see love. She loved that child so much, so much, that she couldn't bear to think of the consequences that that toddler may get hit by a car. But the problem was that the toddler was not feeling that connection and that love. The toddler was receiving disconnect, unapproval, unloved. And that's where our anger controls us and is very misunderstood. So, you know, when I looked back on my experiences of when I would experience anger, especially in relationships, I would feel a lot of anger arise if a partner lied to me or cheated on me or did something that made me feel unsafe, unloved, disconnected. There was a huge fear that if my partner cheated on me, they would leave me. And I loved that person very much. So it's very easy to direct and see the other person or the situation that's triggered the anger. But our real power and our responsibility lies in becoming aware of, building a strong, resilient energy body to hold those powerful emotions, to have the ability to not let them consume us, overwhelm us, and control us, to sit with them and listen to the messages they are telling us. Many, many times, my anger was screaming out that I was abandoning myself, that I was allowing toxic behaviors, that I was overstepping my own boundaries. And sometimes my anger was arising because my ego was bruised and my sense of self and separateness was bruised because someone's belief didn't match up to mine, or because somebody was challenging my beliefs. So having that discernment of why is this anger arising and being able to process it and hold it and really becoming a master of our emotions. And when we do that, we gain self-mastery, we gain empowerment, we gain the ability to consciously choose how we respond to others and situations, which gives us the power to have a little bit of control over the consequences. Not all, because we are all in this together, but some. So, so I hope that this sharing has shone some light maybe on what anger is trying to tell us, why it arises, and inspires you to become curious about your anger and to know that you don't have to get rid of it. You don't have to suppress it or express it in explosive, destructive ways, that there is another path, that anger can be used because it's an energy for positive transformations, both in our lives and in the world, right? If we get angry about something, or if we feel anger arising because we don't agree with something that's happening in the world, we can use it and transform it to make conscious choices and decisions and to take actions in order to change something. Anger is like fire. It's very transformative. When we light a fire and we throw a log onto the fire or wood, it transforms the log into ashes, right? Through intense heat, through intense energy. So we all have that energy within us. We all have that fire, that ability to transform. And so I hope that this encourages you and also relieves some of the shame and guilt and limiting beliefs you have around anger. Remember, we are not our anger. Our anger arises and it dissolves and it can move through us without becoming stuck and suppressed. Okay, so if you are interested in mastering your emotions, I have a free masterclass on my website called Emotional Intelligence, where I talk about all of this. And if you are interested in working with your emotions, working with trauma, regulating the nervous system, becoming aware of your limiting beliefs and unraveling all of your habitual patterns of conditioning, and you are at a point in your life where you would like to start understanding yourself on a deeper level, then I offer a 6-month deep dive into all of this work called Surrender. It's fully supported and there are live classes, live practices, and 6 months worth of recorded practices, workbooks, and a real, it's an immersion that has been created over the past 3 years. So there's a lot of information, there's a lot of practices, and a lot of love, understanding, and approval and acceptance for all of life, for all of us. So thank you for listening, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.